Okay, it is June 9th, 2007. I am Robert Campbell, and I am sitting here with Tom Warner at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and we're going to talk with Tom about his experiences with the T28. In fact, Tom, before we get to that, could you just sort of tell us who you are, give us the short version biography of yourself?
Well, my name is Tom Warner, and I came to the Black Hills in '91 as a B-1 pilot. That's what brought me here, and I got out of the military in 1997. I was actually here till '95, and went down to Texas for a couple of years as an instructor. I kept our home here and came running back after I got out in '97. And then I was an instructor pilot. I wanted to get in the general aviation field after being in the military the whole time. So I figured the best way to do that is get an instructor rating and those items. So I did that. When I got back, got my own airplane and instructed, and that's actually how I met Charlie Summers. Because Charlie
Here in the hills.
Here in the hills, because Charlie is the one that gives check rides to the students we train.
Yeah, what is a check ride? If you call Charlie's voice, it says if you want a check ride, leave your...
A check ride he's an FAA certified check pilot, and what that means is he's certified by the FAA to go up with people to test them, give them their practical test for private pilot's license, for commercial rating, for...
So this is for getting a new license.
Right, for any general aviation pilot who wants to get a private pilot's license, he's the person that's qualified to give them the test, and the practical test, and then give them the certificate, essentially to saying that you are qualified to be a private pilot. So when I was instructing for about a year, he was the person I would send my students to, and so he and I, we had known each other, but got to know each other pretty well during that time, and then he also knew my interest in meteorology. I tell people I'm a meteorologist by education, and that I got a atmospheric science degree and before going to the Air Force, and I currently have a master's degree, which I got here with using the data from the T28 itself. But Charlie approached me, and he knew I was interested in severe weather specifically, and said, "Hey, you want to fly this plane in this thunderstorms?" And since he knew me and he knew my background and he had flown with me and he knew my capability or abilities or lack of, he thought I might be interested, and they needed someone else to help out. They had two pilots at the time, Charlie and Tom, so they needed someone else to help fill the schedule, because it was getting tough doing it just between the two guys. And
So who was flying the T-28 at the time?
Charlie Summers and Tom Root.
Oh, okay.
So those were the only two pilots, and their projects were getting, a month at a time or 2 months at a time. It was tough with just two guys, and we had a big project coming up in 2000, which he asked me before that. So kind of sharing the wealth as far as a week on, week off type deal. With the other pilots, we could rotate, and Charlie at the time too was doing the maintenance side of things, so he really was full time. So he and Tom could alternate the flying part, but Charlie really had the whole deal of having to do maintenance as well. So it was really a pretty big workload on him during the summer months during the project.
So it was an issue of being away from home that long, or
Yeah, I mean,
not the flying time?
No, it's not the flying time. It's just he's got a lot of things going on, and just being gone for the entire time the T28 was
Sure.
on a project or whatever. He wanted to be able to take a week and come back and get on with his life and get things that are piling up done, and then be able to come back after a week or so. So that's why he wanted someone else to help fly.
And so you said?
I said absolutely. As a storm chaser, which I started chasing storms on the ground in 1998, and I've been fascinated with severe weather all my life, and just it's like, oh my gosh, what a job of a lifetime it was being offered to me. And of course, it's a state position, so they had to put it out for for advertisement, advertise a job for a certain period of time. And myself and one other person applied, and when Charlie called the other guy and explained to him what he would be doing, he said, "No, thank you." So I was the only one who applied.
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations! Yeah.
You rose to the top.
So there was a little, there was an interview, and with Paul and Charlie, and so I got the job, to say the least, and it was again just an opportunity of a lifetime for me. I mean, just the interest in weather, the flying, and being able to put all that together, and it was great. The training was interesting because it's a single-seat airplane. It was originally designed as a two-seater, but the back seat's not there. So essentially what Charlie had to do, now both Tom Root and Charlie had both, or Charlie specifically had timed the T28, and I believe Tom Root had a little time as well. So I was
In other T28s.
Other T28.
Yeah.
So they were familiar with him, I believe. Tom Root also. I know Charlie for sure. So, you know, how do you teach this guy who's never flown a T28 how to fly a T28, especially one that's modified in the way it is? You know, it doesn't fly like normal T28s. And everyone that I've talked to said T28s fly, you know, are pretty simple to fly, but this one obviously has many modifications that make it unique. As the pilots call, very unaerodynamic instrumentation hanging off of it, and the weight, and just the workload and stuff. So he sat down, and I just sat in the cockpit, and he talked to me for about 4 hours the whole time, and we went over checklists.
On the ground?
On the ground.
Just sitting there?
Just sitting there. And, you know, he gave me stuff to read, and I read through everything, and then you know, we kind of talked about procedures, and we call it chair flying or hangar flying, and we just sit there and talk through things, and I spend a lot of time outside of that on my own, just going through the checklists, and you kind of just visualize, and this is the thing pilots do, especially the military pilots. They actually have little cockpit mock-ups that you sit in and you run checklists. I mean, they don't flip a switch, nothing happens, but it gives you a chance to go through the procedures. It's all procedural training, and so we did that, and then he gave me a chance to start it up and taxi it one day, and then the next day was a chance to fly it. So my first chance to fly a T28 was solo, and of course he brought marshmallows in case things didn't go well. Could always roast marshmallows.
In case it's burning on the ground?
In case it's burning on the ground, and it doesn't end well.
Wait, did he literally bring marshmallows?
No,
okay.
That's a very typical Air Force thing, and I'll bring the marshmallows to you for solo. And so I just, I went up, and he gave me a list of things to do, it's a little, you're nervous, obviously, when you take a plane up that you've never flown before, but it really flew pretty easily. It was a very balanced, easy plane to fly, but there was a lot of things to manage, to keep track of, but it flew great.
Have you ever flown another T28?
Never in my life.
This is the only one?
This is the only one.
Can you just tell me, now I'm not a pilot or anything, what kind of planes you had flown before? What was the first plane you ever flew?
Well, I flew Cessna 152 trainers, the two-seat trainer, high-wing trainers that most people use to get your pilot's license. So I had my private pilot's license. I got that in college before I went in the Air Force.
So what got you into flying?
I was born wanting to fly. I mean, since I was little, that's all I ever wanted to do.
People around you, or?
No, I just was born with the bug. I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to go on my deck with binoculars and lay on the deck and watch planes that come into Beale Air Force Base. We were about 30 miles north of Beale Air Force Base.
Where's that?
In Northern California.
Okay.
And the SR-71 is kept there now. That's supersonic spy plane, the SR-71, Mach 3.
But you were not from a military family?
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, my dad was in the Army as enlisted, but wasn't a pilot. My uncle was in the Air Force as a technician, but there was never and they were in there when I was. This was all prior to my coming along. This is just, I don't know. I guess there's a gene because I came out and that's all I ever wanted to do. And I'd sit down there all day with binoculars watching planes. We'd hear a sonic boom. Back then, the SR-71 would do the sonic booms all the time. They've cut back on that due to noise complaints, but you'd hear it, and about 5 minutes later, it would fly over our house on approach, and so I'd be out there with binoculars, and I prided myself in 5th grade, I could name 44 different airplanes and identify them on site.
From binoculars.
Well, I could, just from reading books and
Oh,
stuff,
okay.
you know, this was, I typed a list when I was in 5th grade of all the planes that I could identify. And my uncle took me to an air show at Beale in 5th grade. And I said, this is it. I mean, I want to fly for the Air Force. In fact, I got a picture of myself in 5th grade sitting in a T28 that they, you know, taking pictures for $1 or whatever.
Oh, really?
And I mean, I have that in my office right now. And that was, I credit that day as the day I said, I'm going into the Air Force, 5th grade. And everything.
This was your uncle who had been in the Air Force?
Yeah.
Took you to the air show?
He just took me to the air show. He knew I was interested in flying, and I saw the Thunderbirds, and what was interesting is the lead pilot in the Thunderbirds, they were flying T28s at that time, ended up being the commander when I was at pilot training, at the pilot training base. So it was kind of weird deja vu that this guy had gone from there and then became a wing commander.
So you did the standard thing, saved your money, got a pilot's license, flying the Cessna at the airport.
Yeah, and then got ROTC, got my commission, and then went to Enid, Oklahoma for my pilot training, and that's where I got the first chance to see the plains thunderstorms, which were just, I mean, California weather is boring. And I went there and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I just fell in love. I had the meteorology, degree, but I never got a chance to see severe weather, and that was in 1989. Then I went to Enid, Oklahoma. And it was,
You had a meteorology undergrad.
yeah.
Where?
At UC Davis.
UC Davis.
University of California, Davis.
Right. And was that so that you could be a pilot? Was
I
that a
needed
track
all
toward
I
being
needed,
a pilot?
all
or?
I needed was a technical degree.
Any technical degree?
I started out computer science, and within a month realized I don't want to do computer science. And so I had a scholarship, and went and talked to our advisor there, who was an officer, and he was a weather officer and had a meteorology degrees. And he said, "Well, what do you think about meteorology?" I said, "Well, I'm fascinated by it. Sure. If the only requirement is I needed some technical degree, whether it be engineering, physics, anything like that." And math in no way really excited me, and I discovered that early on. So I was like, well, let's do weather because I find it fascinating, and that'll help my flying career.
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know that would be as important to me personally as the flying as well. So it just worked out. I just met someone who had a degree and kind of suggested it. So yeah, I had the BS degree out of UC Davis, and then went to Enid. That's where I got my pilot training. And my first assignment out of pilot training was B1 here at Ellsworth. So that's what brought me here right after pilot training. So.
Quite different from flying a T28.
It is. It is. I mean, I'm glad I went and did all the general aviation, got all the instructor ratings, because my wife, I fly through thunderstorms, I chase storms, I do stuff that many people think that are adrenaline motivated, and it's not. It's passion about understanding and being able to experience these things firsthand, and I really don't like adrenaline, unbelievably, but it's true. But I mean, to be able to actually see a thunderstorm from that close and go through it and see the power, the dynamics, and all that as the pilot, it's just incredible, and it's not because I get a thrill out of it, it's because it's neat to see that.
So you're telling me that you're not a thrill seeker?
I'm not.
Do you have a trampoline?
No, I don't.
Do you ride motorcycles?
No, I would never ride a motorcycle. Scare me to death.
Do you like hang gliding and lightweight? Have you ever gone out in those, or gliders?
I've been in a glider, but that's an airplane to me.
Yeah, but you don't do gliding.
Mm-mm.
Do you have, what other hobbies do you have?
Photography?
Not that flying is just a
No.
hobby. What other
activities
activities do you engage in?
I mean, yeah, I've been called a professional hobbyist, so I mean, I have hobbies.
Right.
That's really, photography, weather, research, weather research, lightning specific is the area of interest for me. But, that's kind of my life, really, right there.
So, what year was this that you first got to go out and fly the T28?
It was got hired in '99, And so the beginning of 2000.
And this was just a fair weather flight around the Rapid
Yeah,
City
it was
Airport
just-
kind of thing,
just
go up
get
for 20
familiar-
minutes, get a feel for the instruments.
Right.
You were talking with Charlie on the radio maybe, or
No.
was he around? You just flew?
He was down at the airport waiting for me to come back. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just go up, give me a list of things, check out the handling characteristics. Any pilot that flies any plane, you learn the flight characteristics of the airplane. You slow it down. You see what the stall characteristics are. It's, turning characteristics and just how it handles when it's configured with the gear, flaps, all those things that you need to be familiar with at how the plane is going to behave and what it's going to do. We do that up in the air at high altitude so that, if anything is unfavorable, you have altitude and can recover the aircraft. And then when you come back down to do your landing, you know how it's going to behave when the gear's down, the flaps are down.
So in general, you were saying it behaves well?
It did. It was really easy to fly. I mean, you have to, Charlie was real good about talking about the flight characteristics on the ground, so there was no surprises. I mean, you got to, unlike a regular T-28, it's heavy and it's got the aerodynamic issues, so when you come into land, you have to carry some power, and if you pull the power like you would on another plane, bam, it would slam on the ground. So.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
If you come in with a T-28 and you pull power to idle, like a lot of planes you come in, when your landing isn't sure, you pull your power to idle.
You
just
glide
float
in.
on it. Yeah, well this doesn't float very well because of the weight and the aerodynamic stuff. So you got to carry power, and the nose does, you can't flare it off like you just kind of drive it onto the runway, as we say. And so just knowing that ahead of time, you're ready for it.
But it's not true that, let's say I became a pilot and I'm up flying this T-28. It's not true that it glides like a meatball and just feels like a ton of lead. Does it feel like a ton of lead up there?
If you lost the engine, it would not be a a very long glide. It would probably glide like a brick. I mean, we pull the power back, and you got some angle to it. But if you compare that to my Cessna, which could just glide forever, comparatively, this thing's coming down pretty quickly.
Okay.
So,
but while it's powered, it has plenty of power, and
it has plenty of power, and I mean it sounds like a Harley when you fire it up, and it's got good power. I've never it felt like, oh come on, let's get me where I'm going, but.
And you're not conscious that you have all these instruments and things dragging and hanging on you.
No, I mean you can feel them. Like when you take off, it's the most squirreliest airplane on takeoff as far as trim. And trim just means what the aerodynamics do. You can take your hands off and the plane just keeps doing what it's doing. But you take off and it wants to yaw this way, and then as you accelerate, it yaws this way. So it's doing all these crazy things that are not out of control, but just noticeable. And it's because of those instruments that cause it to do that.
So it's a little bit like a grocery cart that wants to pull to the left.
Exactly.
You
Until you get to this
compensate.
speed, until you get to this speed, then it goes to the right, and that type of deal. So, but no, I mean it was pretty. I mean the hardest thing of flying the plane was easy to fly. The workload was when you're in the storm, keeping your awareness about you, keeping the engine running, because of the environment that you're in, very high water, it could cool the engine. You're trying to make sure you don't get ice in the engine and spraying alcohol in there and doing all these things. I mean, that's where your workload is the environment. As far as flying, actually keeping the right setup and flying the plane, that's way back here. I mean, you just do that naturally. It's really your focus on the mission, your awareness of the storm, what it's doing to you, and trying to keep on parameters and get through the storm so they get good data. And that's where the focus really was.
Hey, can I ask you one question? Since you're a state employee, how were you? You were a state employee.
Yeah.
Like full time or part time or by contract, or how did that work?
By hours. I mean, I just got paid by the hour. It was a contract, but it was 0 hours to 40 hours. Whatever.
A week.
Yeah.
Whether that's hours in a meeting or flying or
anything that I did related to T28, I got paid the same rate.
You just fill out a timesheet.
Yeah.
What is that rate, by the way? What do you get paid for flying through thunderstorms? People want to know.
Started at like $28 an hour. I think it's like that.
And gradually give you a raise.
Well, I think I got one. I can't remember.
And how low would you have worked? At how low of a salary would you have done?
$2 an hour.
If they
if they would have said, "Do you want to volunteer to do it?" I would have done it.
You would have done it?
Told them that.
You would have done less time, but you would have done it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Or you would have done all the time you could?
I would have done as much as I could in the plane. I mean, this was a dream job for me, and it was just like I say, I really didn't even need to get paid to do it.
How much would you have paid them? We'll let you do this.
I won't go that far.
Okay.
Tell you how much I would have paid them.
Now that we found your line, why don't you tell us about your first flight, your first research flight then?
Okay.
Your first project, your first
Yeah,
flight.
that was in Goodland, Kansas.
Just tell us how this works.
Goodland, Kansas in 2000, and that particular flight, and I'd done a number of flights, just clear air flights, just to get some more time in the airplane, and this was the first in-cloud flight, and it
Did
was
you
a
fly it
storm.
down to Goodland, Kansas?
What's that?
Were you the only pilot on this project?
No, Charlie was there too.
You and Charlie?
Yeah, me and Charlie were there.
One of you flew it down there?
Yeah, I can't remember who flew it down
Okay.
there, but Charlie or Tom flew the plane down there. I drove down because I had a certain period of time that I was going to be on duty, and during that time, then Charlie was going to do maintenance while I flew, and then he could be there to help me out if I had any questions or any issues came up. So the first flight, the storm fired up. It was kind of a distant storm. It wasn't the ideal type storm. It was a long shot, as they say, and so they launched me, and you're apprehensive, but it wasn't this real isolated boomer thunderstorm that I was going to penetrate. So it was not a scary first day in that regard. It could have been a lot more severe type storm, but it was a good storm, in that it was producing some good downflow winds. And I essentially just took off, drove as far as they would let me, as far as the range of the radar, because it was right on the outskirts of the range. And
How
then,
far away is that, by the way? About?
Usually 60 to 80 miles.
Okay.
Depending on the radar and the equipment that's being used in the research facility.
How long-
Every project's different.
How long can you keep this T28 up in the air?
About an hour and a half.
Okay.
And it depends, because the airplane has a what we call low blower or high blower. It's a supercharged airplane. If you go into high blower, it really significantly increases your fuel flow. And that was an issue on my first flight, because I couldn't get up to the altitude that they wanted without going into high blower. So I was using fuel. On some of the flights, you can stay in low blower and be right almost at its highest it can go, but you still are significantly extending the range and endurance. So I was in high blower, and I went down and turned around, or they said, okay, that's as far as we can track you, or useful as far as getting coincident radar information. Turned around, headed back, and then when I came out, they said, hey, there's another storm way over here. And I'll never forget Charlie, when he sits there and he was talking to me saying, okay, things you don't do. You only go after one storm or another storm right in the same. You don't go from this storm to this storm, because they'll run you out of gas. There's always one guy that says, hey, can you just do this one more pass? He goes, you are the one strapped to this plane in the middle of a thunderstorm. You don't let them talk to you into anything that you don't want to do. You understand? Okay, yeah. Okay, very clearly. So sure enough, first thing, okay, way on the other side of the area, there's a storm crocking up. Do you want to go get it? And
These are the scientists talking.
Yeah, the scientists talking.
They really want these data.
They really want the data. And I've been in a high blower this whole time, and I look down, and the storm that I was in is just collapsing, just absolutely collapsing. And what that translates to is huge winds coming out of the bottom of the storm. All the precipitation, everything that was in the storm is doing this.
And you understand this because you have a degree in
I
meteorology.
understand all this meteorology stuff, so I know what's going on. I've chased storms. I know what storms do from the ground. And I see this line of complete dust, total, brown out conditions of dust, and it's going towards Goodland, where I'm supposed to land. And I'm looking down, and I see it going toward the radar site, and I figure there's about 20 minutes before it hits Goodland. And I know that this could be like 70+ mile-an-hour winds. First flight, hearing what Charlie's saying to me, stay on one storm, don't go all over the place, they'll run you out of gas.
It was like Star Wars.
I was like, I know. So I said,
listen
nope.
to your fear.
I said, nope, can't do it. And I said, okay. Got real quiet on the other side, and I said, no, I don't have the fuel. And I'd only been up, 40, 45 minutes. I could have stayed on this storm for another 20 minutes, but they were done with that. was collapsing. They didn't want anything. So I had 20 minutes to either stay there or come home, in my mind. And I said, no, I can't go over to that storm. I don't have the gas to go over there and get back. And besides, there's this big wave of wind. Chances are, if I don't come in now, I'm going to have to divert and land somewhere else. And then we're going to have to send support to, fuel, or I have to wait it out overnight and bring it back. So I came in and landed. 20 minutes, we got the plane in the hangar, 70-mile-an-hour winds. And it was...
The dust bowl hits.
The line of dust hits, and it lasts for about an hour and a half.
And you could not have landed in that dust while that was blowing?
There's no way.
Because you have to have a visual...
I mean...
Can you land this? I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
You can land under instruments, conditions, but that is... I would have chosen not to land in those conditions, because the visibility was so bad due to the dust that you
it's not for the engine or the
no,
instruments.
it's simply the
visibility.
Visibility, and that's another thing that Charlie, there's planes that are set up to do instrument, and this is an instrument qualified plane. But the fact is, you're in a canopy that has metal all around you. The visibility is not that great. It's not the type of plane that you want to be shooting right down to minimums for instrument procedures. It's just there's certain planes that aren't set up well for that, and this is one of them. And so he said, if there's a place to go VFR where the weather's good, you go land there. And I did that.
VFR is what?
Visual flight rules. In other words, it's not I don't have to fly an instrument approach to get in. And I did that in Norman in 2003 too. I was flying a thing, and the line came over to Norman, and I was listening and talking to tower, and it's like, it's pretty much down to minimums right now. So okay, I'm not heading back there. And it was clear as can be. The storm had moved, and it was just I looked down and I could see this airfield down here, clear as can be, and it's Reno, basically about 30-minute drive from there. So I just landed there, got gas, got lunch, and by the time I got back to the plane, the storm had cleared and I could take off and get back into Norman.
And you just flew back to Norman.
Yeah. So
had you known that airfield was there? I mean,
oh yeah, you know
when you take off what your options are.
Oh, absolutely. You're always.
You're not looking around for a highway.
You got a list, direction, and you got a GPS, and you hit the nearest button, and it tells you what the nearest airport is.
Yeah. What did you have in terms of? I mean, what did you have? Like a folded map on your leg, or a fancy computer screen?
You got a little map. No, it's pretty.
It's like an ONC kind of.
No, it's just a general aviation map, and then you have a
literally
GPS.
Just sitting there in the cockpit with you.
Yeah. And then you have a GPS that you can sling to. We could actually fly instrument procedures with the GPS. So I'm having an ILS, but the instrumentation is not glass cockpit or anything like that you see in general aviation nowadays. I mean, it's 1949. We've upgraded some of the avionics, but it's no way glass cockpit. So.
Did you ever have anxiety that this was an old plane?
No, because I have a 1979 or 1975 plane, and I know how maintenance works, and I know Charlie was working on it, and I know his experience and attention to detail. So I was never concerned about the age of the plane.
So, by the way, as long as we're talking about Charlie, what's Charlie like as an aviator? Just tell us about Charlie.
He's he's just an incredible wealth of experience and highly respected by the aviation community. He's always got something funny to say. He's a great storyteller, and he's always making jokes. But at the same time, his experience, his expertise on what he does, his attention to detail is unsurpassed. I mean, as an aviator, he doesn't push boundaries or regulations or anything like that. I mean, he's just a great, the kind of guy that you want to be teaching you how to fly, or you want to just have him talk so you can learn. Just anytime he's talking, you're just pulling information from him because.
I mean, from your story there about your first flight, it sounds like he was saying, "Here's the side of caution. Stay on this side."
Absolutely.
Is that what he's like?
Oh yeah. I mean, and his. This is your butt's in the plane, they're on the ground, and he keeps saying, what speed are you guys doing down there? You're 0, I'm flying, and he's been through a lot. He knows, he got shot down in Vietnam. He's had a lot of experience, So he's talking from experience. So that means a lot to me. And so yeah, he was very influential on that first flight. And the next day in the morning briefing, the scientists were like, "Well, I thought this plane could fly for an hour and a half," and I had to sit there and explain to him, "Well, I was in a high blower, so that cuts the time down." And essentially, if I went after the other storm, I would not have returned to Goodland. This was my first flight. I wasn't about to do that. And and the scientists were grumbling about it, but Charlie's like, right on. I mean, you're in control of that.
So you never felt that you had been overcautious on your first flight?
No, no, because I was doing exactly what Charlie recommended. Now, and with every time you go through a storm, you get more and more confident, more and more, you expand your envelope. But I mean, that's you don't want to just go in and just, sure, I'll do whatever you say on your first flight. I mean, this is something that not many pilots have got an opportunity to experience, and no matter how much someone can explain it to you, what it's going to be like in a thunderstorm, until you get in there, you don't know what's going on. And every time you go up, you get more and more knowledge base that expands your envelope of awareness and understanding.
So can you tell me what it's like to do one of these penetrations? Can you give us sort of the story
sure,
of the typical penetration?
Typical penetration.
And what you're doing at that time.
Okay. You get up to whatever altitude, typically 19 to 21,000 feet. And so you get a block altitude, and they're kind of telling you where to go. You can kind of see it visually, usually, at least as you approach the storm.
Who are you usually working with on the ground?
You're talking to a ground controller on the ground who can see your position, and then they got the radar. So they got the radar that's going. They can see where the storm is, the area they want to go, and they can see you. You're telemetering the GPS position to them.
Right. And who was this usually
And this
for you?
was Andy Detweiler.
Oh, okay.
For me. For occasionally Paul Smith, but mostly Andy Detweiler. So they said, okay, this is your heading, this is where we want you to go.
But he could not see you visually, of
No,
course. He saw you and the weather on the radar screen.
All he sees is this little X, and here's the radar.
Okay.
And sees where you're tracking and says either change your heading this way or that way.
And I assume you're also talking to
Air traffic control.
air traffic control.
Yeah.
They give you the block of altitude.
Right.
And say,
They're the ones.
You do what you like in this block,
Right.
and we'll.
And he says, "This is where I'd like you to go." And then I say, "This is where I want to go." They say, "Okay, go there." It's okay, thank you. And then I say, "All right, I'm going there." So it's a lot of radio work, and sometimes you just, like I said, the workload is getting into the storm and standstill. So as you approach the storm, once you get into the storm, you turn on the alcohol ice, the prop ice, turn on the carb, all these things that protect the airplane from the engine stop running, and when you get into
They basically spray the engine and the prop with alcohol.
alcohol goes on the prop to keep from ice building up. Alcohol goes in the carburetor to keep ice from forming in the throat, and then the carb heat takes air from inside the engine compartment into heated air to help keep that warm rather than outside air. So those are the things you turned on. You had to make sure all your instruments are on. So once you're all set to go in, you hit the storm, and then it's just flying the airplane, and it could be a very violent, up throwing you around as you enter the storm, because it's a very abrupt interface between the clear air and the updraft, which is usually where you hit it. And at that point, you try to maintain 140 knots, which knots is what we use for flying. And instantly, you can get into an updraft that's just going to take you up. And we tried to maintain between 150 and 130. So if we're going up, the only way to keep it down is to try to push over, but that makes you go faster. We'd accept up to 150 knots to try to keep it down, but a lot of times you just kept going up. And
Wait, now why are you trying to keep it down?
well, you're trying to stay into a block of altitude.
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly. And I mean, more than once I've said, "Hey, center, I'm getting in a huge updraft here. I'm probably going to burst through this altitude block, or keep an eye on me." And most of them were like, "Yeah, you're in a thunderstorm. No one's around you. I don't care." Who else is?
I'm guessing it's not really popular real estate at that moment.
Right. But occasionally you get this guy that's just anal, and it's like, "Whoa, how long are you going to be outside your altitude block?" And I said,
At air
"Well, I don't
traffic.
know. I'm in a thunderstorm, thank you." And, I said, "Look, I'm in a supercell thunderstorm. This one happened to be tornadic." And I said, "I don't know. I'll let you know." And he was like, "Well, let me know when you get back in the altitude." And I said, "Well, surely there's no one else around me, right?" And he goes, like, "Well, not right now." So I was like, "Come on." anyone would be an idiot to be where I was at
This
that
would
moment.
be unusual for an air traffic controller too, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Dealing with people who were in the storm.
You'd often hear people, them saying, other airplanes asking, "What's that guy doing?" Over the radio, and you explain, and like, "Oh, that's nuts."
It's a science experiment, basically.
Yeah, weather experiment. He's going through thunderstorms, and so yeah, you get the comments. But really, once you got in a storm, it's loud. The hail really pounds it, and you're just kind of focusing on maintaining the parameters, the flight parameters. The lightning's flashing all around you. It's kind of I describe it as being on a roller coaster in the fog. I mean, it's flashing. You never know where it's going to go.
You're not looking outside because there's nothing to see, right?
There's really nothing to see. Once you're inside, it's completely white. And the things that you do look outside for are the size of the hail that's hitting the canopy. You can see the impact size, and then you look over the right side to see how much ice you're building up. Okay. We have a little black tape there, and when it turns white, that means it's got lots of ice.
Nice
so that's our the pilot ice detector. So you occasionally look out for that, but really your head's in the cockpit. You're watching your artificial horizon. You keep yourself level with the world because you're getting thrown around pretty heavily, and then you're watching your engine, make sure the engine's running, and watching your airspeed. And that's the focus. You're just trying to get through this thing as close to parameters as you can.
And what are the parameters? How many different parameters are you supposed to?
Really keeping the airspeed between 130 and 150. You don't want to get fast because then if you get a real big gust, that's when things could get compromised structurally. If you keep it below a certain speed, no matter how big of a gust hits you, you won't bend the aircraft, you'll stall first, and you want to make sure that's most important, keeping the airspeed under control. And then,
but that's for safety reasons.
Well, really, you're in an emergency environment, so
right.
You're keeping the aircraft safe is first and foremost, getting the data second.
But it isn't for the data that they want you in this speed range.
It's what the plane can handle, and it's what you can handle.
Because too fast, you get too big of G-forces.
And you could rip the wings off.
And too slow, you might stall.
Right.
Okay, so this is the safety range.
So you're keeping it in the safety envelope, if you will, and then also trying to keep on heading for their data.
Because they want a straight shot through the storm.
Right, they want a straight line, and then keeping the altitude in the right range, just because that's the block you're allowed to work with. And then also you're talking what you're experiencing, because that's part of the data that you're collecting. Since it's recording our voice on the video, is if there's close flashes, if you think you're getting instructed, what size hail, how intense the turbulence is. So you're always trying to verbalize what you're experiencing as well.
Keep talking. Kind of like this, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot going on, and it's amazing how fast it goes. But you're so focused. Some people, what's it like being? Well, I'm so focused on doing all this stuff, I don't really have the chance to be outside and, hey, this is cool. I'm flying through a thunderstorm, because you're like, I'm all right here, focused on stuff, and it's not until after you get on the ground that you really think through everything you experience.
Besides the aeronautical stuff, how much of the data, the sensors, the instrument stuff do you have to be watching and switching off and turning on and monitoring while you're in a penetration?
It's, for the most part, it's pretty hands-off. We turn stuff on and then it just runs. There is an in-cloud light that you trigger to kind of marks the tape or whatever to tell you this is when you get in the storm, and then you're supposed to turn it off when you get out of the storm, and it kind of shows them. They use that to then go back and say, okay, this was, I half the time forget to do that, just because that to me is a low priority. You're just turning the light on and off. But so other than that, really, we do some tests when we're climbing out with the instrumentation to calibrate it and such. But after that,
climbing out, you mean flying up to the storm?
Yeah, when clear air, not in the storm. We turn on something that tests the electric field meters, charges the airplane up, and then puts like 8,000 volts on the outside of the airplane, and then you turn it off and it bleeds off, and so that they test the field meters, and but other than that, once you're in, you're just kind of flying, and you're really not responsible for switching anything on or off or dealing with the instruments.
Were you very conscious of how much ice is on the airplane?
You're always conscious of that. That's one of the big things, and what's amazing is that the plane, any aircraft that builds up ice due to the aerodynamic and weight, it impacts the ability of it to fly, and after about an inch of ice, the thing just starts dropping. I mean, you just can't hold altitude. Combination of the aerodynamic change. But a lot of times, if you're in a good, nice big thunderstorm that's accumulating that much ice really quickly, you'll hit a hail core, and the hail will just beat off the ice. So, I mean, you could de-ice your plane in seconds if you hit a hail core.
Because the ice buildup that's supercooled water.
That's water that freezes on impact. And then, so that's kind of the coating, and then if you get into
And the hail cleans it off.
just beats it off and knocks it out. It's great. It takes a couple seconds and you're done.
So, someone was telling me, Wayne Sands must have been telling me, he says, no, it's not the lightning. Everybody asked me about the lightning. Did you really care about the lightning?
I was very interested about lightning, and it gets your attention, but really, a lot of times we didn't even know we got struck. We knew there was a close flash, but we didn't know we got struck. The one time that I really knew that it was an issue, and you may have heard the video, it was when I had that one that hit the prop. That's one of the attachment points. You don't normally attach behind us. Well, this
The
one was
lightning would attach.
Yeah. So you get a burn mark on the flaps.
Just because most of the plane is behind you.
Well, because that's the pointy part of the plane. It goes to the, most likely initiates on very sharp curves, which
Like the edge of the wing or antenna or.
Exactly. In this case, it was tip of the prop, and man, that was like someone came and slapped me in the side of the helmet, just went whack, and I'm like, whoa, it gets your attention.
Just the noise and the light does.
Yeah. So that one was.
But you're perfectly safe inside the airplane, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't feel anything. I mean, it just, someone slaps inside your helmet type of deal, and the bright flash, it startles you. But other than that, the lightning wasn't that big a deal. It's the ice and the hail. The turbulence can get pretty bad, but both Charlie and I agree that we were surprised at how smooth it was in certain parts of this thunderstorm. There were only these interfaces where you got an updraft and a downdraft right next to each other that you really get rocked. But otherwise, in the updraft, it was kind of a uniform lift column of air that was really smooth inside that you go through. And I mean, you could lift it up, but really, it's the ice is really the thing that's going to make you have to change your plan as far as flying, because you're going to have to descend, melt it off, and go back up. The hail is just, it gets on your nerves after a while if someone's beating on the side.
It's loud.
It's loud, so I mean, it's.
How loud is it? Well, this plane is loud anyway, right?
Well, the plane's loud, and the hail gets much louder than the plane. So I mean, you just, if you can think of driving a car and experiencing hail, take that and multiply, because you're doing 170 miles per hour equivalent in the car with these big things. I mean, it gets loud, and it's sometimes it sounds like it's going to crash through. No, it's not going to, but it gets loud where I couldn't talk, and it's really the loudest thing.
So does it get to rock concert loud?
Oh yeah. I mean, we have earplugs in and everything, but I mean, it gets.
So you have.
I have
stuff to
earplugs
reduce
and
it.
a helmet on, both.
Otherwise, your ears would ring for days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I get that loud.
So how about this? People have talked about this. Guys on the ground talk about this decibel DBZ limit. Were you conscious of that?
For the
Like, they
radar
don't send
version?
you into the heart of a storm.
Yeah, we had a limit of about 55.
Was it 55? I've
50.
heard various numbers.
55, 60. Andy would always tell me if it got above 60.
Okay.
I said, we just have to be cautious. And Tom Root was probably the least concerned about how high the reflectivity was.
So Tom's a thrill seeker.
he's more caution to the wind than any of us, I think. I mean, he was.
Are you more or less cautious than Charlie?
I think Charlie, I'm probably more cautious from Charlie due to the experience that I have. I don't have the experience that he does. So he knows what the plane can handle much better than I do. He's seen a lot more. So for that reason, I was probably the most conservative pilot due to my experience level. I mean, by the end of my 3 years that I flew it, I mean, I was very comfortable going in the storm. And when Andy told me, okay, this storm's getting stronger, it's over 60 dBz, I tried not to let it affect where I go. I just, okay, yeah, I know that. Here's really where the hardcore is, and I'm thinking more, which direction would I turn if it got real bad?
Mm-hmm.
That type of thing. You're just thinking more about those escape heading that it has the potential to get too loud. But it's up to the pilot. If you get into something you don't like, you turn and get out of it. So when Andy would say that, that just kind of indicated to me there might be something in there you don't like.
And
But I never really had to bail because it got so bad. So
as if the DBZ reading or whatever was too high, that would mean too much ice in the air, too much water in the air, too much, not the updrafts. It has nothing to do with
all it means is how big the hail is.
how big the hail.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's driven by hail.
Hail. DBZ is just telling you how that the more energy you get reflected from the radar, the bigger the hail is.
Sure.
And so that was really the only caution when they told you that, was that you either got big hail or huge volumes of water hail that it maybe get.
Because if
rough.
enormous hail struck the T28, the hazard would be, or the practical result would be what? Break the
Windshield breaking. I mean, Charlie all told us about the one day where he got out of it because it just got too big, and it actually opened the hatch on the oil filler can. It hit it just right that it undid the latches, and so his oil filler latch popped open.
Wait, the oil filler is what? This is the cover on the...
Yeah, I mean, it's not the actual cover where you fill the oil, but it's a hatch that goes over the top of it. Okay,
Oh, I
there's
see,
these
I
little
see.
push button, flip up things,
Kind of like the equivalent of popping the thing open before you fill up your car with
Right.
gas. I see.
and it got hit so hard that that popped open, and I mean, he said it was rough, and when he got back down, there was noticeable increase in damage on the wingtips, which those aren't hardened, and that's when he chose to get out of it. I mean, there was one time where I was seeing these impacts on the windscreen that big, but they were soft. They weren't the hard hail. And so, I mean, I knew there was some big hail. And that was that one storm where Andy said, hey, we're over 60 dBz, you know, be careful. But what I was getting into was melting hail or soft hail, even though it was big. I knew that, you know, if that was hard, I would probably thought, I'd have to make the determine whether that was too much or not.
Because, again, if too big of hail was, I mean, what would be the scenario? Let's say you get into cantaloupe hail, or I don't know what.
It's going to start breaking things.
Like,
Bottom line, it's going to start breaking the windshield. It's going to, you know, the prop, you know, withstand the hail, but I don't know what the prop can handle. I imagine at a certain point, the prop's going to break.
yeah.
You-
So the
you beat
windshield,
on
the prop,
the prop, the engine, it's going to, you know, damage the fins on the engine, so it could affect your cooling. It could impact and hit a jug that actually causes it to move a little bit, and then you could have a catastrophic thing on the jug. And really, the other thing is the instrumentation isn't designed to withstand it, and you got thousands of dollars of instrumentation up here, and if you get too big, you're going to start taking off their instruments, and they don't want that.
sure.
So that's also their input, is like, look, if it gets too big, we're not going to get any data.
Yeah.
So-
All those nice cameras
So
and...
there's a lot of bad things that could happen, not only safety, but just money, and is it worth it to press forward in that
Right.
environment.
And I'm not asking out of morbid curiosity, but well, partly that. But also, you know, see, just to me, one of the unique things, probably the unique thing about the T28 is going to a place where human beings didn't
Oh.
typically go.
Absolutely. To me, there's a handful.
Going regularly,
Yeah.
going normally,
Yeah.
almost, you know, intentionally. I mean, what's the biggest storm that you'd ever gotten into before the T28? You were flying huge military aircraft, you were flying little Cessnas.
In the military, we try to avoid thunderstorms by 20 miles, above 23,000, 10 miles below 23,000. That was our criteria. There were a couple times when we were flying low level that we couldn't see very far in front of us because we're low, and so you come over a ridge and all of a sudden, whoa, there's a thunderstorm type of deal. A lot of times it was at night. So I've gotten into where you start getting the precipitation static, where it's the static, almost like radio static that you hear on an AM station, starts building up, building up, building up, and that's charge building up on your airplane. We call it P
But you're
static.
not hearing it on your...
Oh yeah, you hear it in your intercom.
Oh, the intercom is getting static, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But we call it P static. Well, essentially, the aircraft is charging up, and it's essentially it's you're hearing interference.
But if I were just sitting there without the headphones on, I wouldn't
No.
hear. Oh, I see.
No.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where you can't even talk to your crew. It gets so bad. And there's been a couple times where I had to abort a low-level route because there was a thunderstorm ahead of us, and we got into the fringes of it, where we got this P static. There was flashes nearby, but no hail. So I've never been in any kind of hail.
So it was rain that you
It
were
was
flying
just
through?
heavy rain
And some lightning flashes
and lightning
nearby.
flashes close by, but nothing that I would call getting into a thunderstorm.
Had you ever been struck by hail in an airplane before the T-28? And had you ever had these kind of updrafts?
Well, you get turbulence and stuff like that because you get low-level turbulence, mechanical turbulence that's not related to thunderstorm. I mean, I've been in the B-1 at night in Montana where I could barely read my instruments because we were getting jostled around.
Because of the engine?
No, this is because of airflow over the terrain.
Oh, I
makes
see.
it very turbulent. We call that mechanical turbulence. And I mean, it's to the point where sometimes where I say, all right, we're out of here. This is just too much for us to
As
to
opposed
deal.
to what kind of turbulence?
Thunderstorm turbulence, which is due to the thermodynamics, the motions inside this thunderstorm. This is just wind flow over the terrain causes eddies and stuff like that. So I've been in turbulence that's severe, but I've not been in the weather to that level. Hail, never got struck by lightning before, and I've got struck a couple times. That one for sure, and then two other ones that we suspect after the fact. So yeah, I mean, this was new, and you bring up the point about telling people. I mean, there's 9 guys that did this, and every time you tell somebody about
9 guys who flew this T-28.
right in the career of its time, 9 of them. I think, and the picture I have of us is 5 of us left that are still alive. And you know, you start telling somebody, and they say, "Oh yeah, hurricane hunters," and you go, "No," because everyone thinks, "Oh yeah, you're a hurricane hunter." No,
It's a hurricane hunter.
that's a C-130 or P-3 that flies through hurricanes.
For the sake of tracking the hurricane.
Right, getting data, and
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're flying through these bad storms. There's turbulence, but I said, okay,
These are big planes.
these are big planes that fly through storms with no hail. The T-28 is the only aircraft like it in the world that could regularly fly through plains, thunderstorms, and encounter the hail up to 3 inches in diameter on a daily basis, do it safely, and get good data.
Because the limitation is the hail, it's not the ice buildup.
No, yeah, I mean, well,
But I mean, the T-28 is not armored to deal with ice buildup.
no,
It's armored for the hail.
Yeah.
It's modified for the hail.
What makes it a unique airplane is the armor plating to protect it from hail. Because no other plane, if a plane does not have any armor plating, it's going to come out like a crushed soda can.
Because you had some modifications for ice buildup, like you were saying, the alcohol, and the
Right.
carb heat, and all that stuff.
Right.
But are those unusual for airplanes?
No, not at all. Those are normal anti.
What's unusual is that armor plating on the wings,
Right,
etc.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we did that with the alcohol spraying, and those were not unusual.
I mean, your Cessna doesn't have those. But
I have carb heat, which we had in the
Oh, you do?
plane. So that puts hot air into the throat to keep ice from building up. I don't spray alcohol in there, and I'm not sure what other planes spray alcohol actually into the carburetor. But spraying stuff on the prop, spraying stuff on the wings is very common for de-icing. So.
And it really is that unusual. This is not some technicality that makes this T-28 unusual. You're like, oh, this is 0.29 millimeters of armor plating, and they only had 0.26 or something
No,
like that.
I mean,
In other words, what's the airplane that's most like this that you know of?
there is no plane that I know of that was armor plated for the purpose of going through storms. I mean, they did a couple. There's Rough Rider where they flew planes through thunderstorms, but I think we were up higher altitudes, and they did lightning strike. They did an F-106 or an F-102.
This is another science project.
Yeah, this was NASA doing this stuff, lightning strikes to airplanes. But see, they weren't going in to sample hail. We're going in there to find hail, and so I don't think those were modified at all. So if they got into hail, they needed to get out right away, and they avoided hail. We went after the hail, and that's truly what makes us different. If you don't have the armor plate in, you're not going to survive the hail that we got in, period.
Do you know all 9 guys, or who are the 9 guys who've flown this? Tom Warner, Tom Root, Charlie Summers, Wayne Sand.
Andy would know all the names. I don't.
Do you know of any of the others? I know this is all before your time.
Yeah, it is.
I'm just checking that in case
I would
there's
remember
some-
I would remember it if someone said it.
Okay.
But I don't remember the names. There were 5. It was Wayne, Tom, Charlie, and myself,
somebody else in the photo with you.
and Captain Zoom.
Oh yeah, Captain Zoom. I met Captain Zoom.
Okay. So there are 5 of us that are currently living. So, yeah.
The turbulence, getting bumped around in there.
Yeah.
You got like a 5-point harness, like my little
Right.
kid in her car seat.
Right.
5-point.
Well, that's 4 points.
4 points. Probably a good idea. You'd get knocked around there.
If you don't strap yourself down, you'll hit your head on the top.
So
you go from positive to negative G's, where 0 G's you float. Negative is actually the plane's just accelerating down, and you're going to go up. And if you ever forget to do that, it doesn't take long. I mean, I can't recall a time that I actually bumped my head. Again, Charlie has, and again, the experience of doing this for many years as he had. He said he bumped his head a couple times. It's like, oops.
Because he wasn't strapped in?
Right.
Or
Well, he
strapped in
just
tight
wasn't
enough?
tight enough. A lot of times
Oh.
you get loose so you can move around and start the engine and do
I
all
see.
these things that you really can't do easily when it's cinched down.
Right.
But you lock the shoulder harness so you can't move forward. Otherwise, it has a recoil thing that you can lean forward and do stuff. But then when you go in the storm, you lock it so that it doesn't have to take an inertial reel to lock it. You're locked.
Oh, you're locked on.
all
And it's
the
pretty
time.
snug.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really want to get yourself as snug as possible. But again, a lot of times we start loose and then cinch it up before you get the storm.
So how does this compare to other planes that you've flown?
As far as...
I mean, you're always strapped into, let's say, a B-1. I don't know.
Yeah,
you go through turbulence in some other plane.
It's similar to B1 as far as the attachment and the harness and stuff. I mean, it was no different than
But I mean, the levels of turbulence and the experience of going through this?
It got up to severe turbulence. Again, I don't think it was as bad as I'd expect. I had been in as severe turbulence in the B1 due to mechanical low-level turbulence.
Mm-hmm.
But every time you go up and fly, you got into it. It wasn't like, okay, today's going to be a smooth ride.
Yeah.
You knew it was going to be a bumpy ride. And if you did, well, then it's a weak storm.
A couple of quick questions. So you flew this 3 summers,
Yeah.
3 projects, or was it the same project?
Well, it was multiple Goodland was all of 2000. We flew 2 projects in 2003, which was Norman and Greeley. And I think we did Greeley. Yeah, we did Greeley for 2 different times. That was well worth.
What 3 seasons did you fly? 2000?
2000, 2001, 2003. I think the plane didn't fly 2002 because of the engine. So yeah, it was 2000, 2001, and 2000. Because we broke the plane in 2000 at Goodland.
You broke it.
Well, that's when I say that's when the Tom Root had the jug, that video that show where it's like that happened in 2000. So I think it was a year before we got that running again. I can't remember. I'd have to go look to see if we flew 2001 or 2002 was the first year we were back up. I know for 2000 and 2003 I flew missions. There was one of those 2 years that I also flew a mission. I just can't remember how long it was to get the plane back up and running. I think it was actually 2002 was our next year that we actually did something.
So how long were you out in the field typically? A couple weeks, 6 weeks?
Yeah, the projects were typically a month, sometimes a little bit longer, and I was out there usually at a week at a time.
And how many,